Morning, everyone.
Morning.
So I think that most of us make at least three important decisions during our lives. Where to live, what to do, and with whom to do it. We choose the neighbourhood where we will raise our families. We choose the career that will consume most of our waking hours. We choose our spouse, and we choose our friends. Making these choices is such a natural part of our everyday lives that we often forget that we are among the first humans ever to make them. For most of history, people lived where they were born and did what their parents had done. So bakers baked, smiths smithed, and the little bakers and little smiths were limited in both their choice of potential life partners and friends. Social structures, such as religions and classes, physical structures, such as oceans and mountains, determined how, where, and with whom people would live. And we had very little to decide. But the industrial and technological advances of the past few hundred years has left us with a bewildering array of choices. We have all been pushed outward on an explosion of personal liberty that has left us with options and alternatives that our forebears could not possibly have imagined. So I get that the big question of this series, what do you really want, is a relatively modern one. And I also get that it is a relatively Western one. Barely a week goes by where I don't think about the brickmakers that Carissa, Sammy and I met in South Africa. Men who live by a river, sleeping in a shack by night, breaking their backs by day, hoping that they make enough bricks to put some food in their bellies and, if they're lucky, some beer at the weekend. And I think about them often because I'm fully aware that they don't get to live how I live. They don't get to enjoy the things that I get to enjoy. And they don't have the luxury of being able to sit down and ask the big existential questions. But you do. And you must. You must force yourself, if necessary, to ask what you really want out of this life. Here you are, probably past the halfway point, most of you. Maybe most of the good stuff's gone. Maybe most of it's passed you by. And so here you are, and you've got this limited number of years left to live. It is absolutely essential that you ask yourself what it is you want out of those years. And here's something that both theology and science both agree upon. You are lucky to be alive. Both science and theology agree on this point, that you are here today, able to think about your own future, is extraordinarily improbable. And the improbability of it makes it all the more amazing. You can imagine any future you want to. So what do you really want? This morning, it's Christian Palm Sunday, so we're going to look at one of the traditional Bible passages that Christians always look at during Holy Week. And as we're doing this, I'm going to teach you, at least I'm going to try and teach you, that what you really want out of life is probably quite close to what you're supposed to want. Let me say that again, because it's a disappointing sentence. I have a hunch that what you really want is probably quite close to what you're supposed to want. I'll save that for the end. In the Gospel according to St. John, we're told that it was just before the Passover feast. Now, the Passover feast, as you know, is the meal in the Jewish religious calendar. And for a Jew, particularly a first century Jew, this meal isn't just food to eat, it's a culinary history lesson. If you were to ask a first century Jew what he considered to be the definitive moment in his nation's history, he would say without hesitation, the Exodus from Egypt. From a young age, Jewish boys were taught that many years earlier, the Jewish nation had been a nation of slaves. Slaves whose sole purpose had been to construct under duress the elaborate cities of Lower Egypt that would eventually become tourist attractions. And from a young age, they were taught that one day God sent Moses, the great hero of their story, to deliver their people from slavery. They were also taught that the Pharaoh of Egypt proved uncooperative, and that in response to his uncooperativeness, God sent the angel of death. And as any first century Jew could tell you, the reason Passover is called Passover is because at a key point in the story, the Jews were told to daub the blood of a lamb, put the blood on their doors, and the angel of death, quite a creepy story when you think about it, which you probably shouldn't. Well, the angel of death is hovering ghost-like around the streets of Egypt, killing everyone. He would come to these houses with the blood on the door and say, oh, there's good Jews in there, I'll go and kill their nasty Egyptian neighbours instead. So that's the story, it's horrible. And then following that night of death, the Jewish people were freed from the inconvenience of having to live a life they didn't want to, and for the first time in living memory could begin to work towards living a life that they really wanted. So Passover is all about moving from one life to another, from slavery to freedom, from horrible to good, blah, blah, blah. And the Passover meal is a symbolic reminder of this story. So for example, on the table in front of Jesus and in front of every other family eating in Jerusalem that night 2,000 years ago, there is roast lamb. And the roast lamb is a reminder of the blood of the lamb that played such an important role in the story. Similarly, there was a bowl of red fruit stew, which was a symbolic reminder of the red clay with which they were forced to make bricks. In that regard, there was always a bowl, still is today, of herbs that were bitter to remind them of how bitter and horrible their life used to be. So in this scene, you've got Jesus and you've got his friends, and they're sitting down to this symbolic meal. And according to Jewish culture, the youngest person in the room, which was probably John, who's writing these words, would have stood up and asked the host of the meal, who's Jesus, a series of prescribed questions. The first of which is, why is tonight different from all other nights? And then Jesus, like every other host in Jerusalem that night, would have proceeded to retell the well-known story of the Exodus from Egypt. And as visual aids in that story, he would have pointed to the lamb and the stew and the bitter herbs and so on. And all over Jerusalem, packed into every kitchen, every dining room, families and pilgrims and friends are hearing and are retelling this familiar story of how their people had once been freed from having to live a miserable life not of their own choosing. And not for 500 years had the retelling of this story been so poignant. The one thing that all first century Jews could agree upon was that life was miserable. The Romans were taxing them to death. The government of Herod was taxing them to death. By the time government was finished with their paycheck, they had 15% left to pay their own bills and feed their own families. These people were being forced to work harder and harder for less and less so that their oppressors could enjoy a corrupt life sitting on a beach somewhere. And in the retelling of this Passover story is the rebellious hope that maybe tonight the Messiah will come. Maybe tonight the new Moses, the great alpha male of the Jewish faith, will kick down the door of history and put an end to all this corruption and get rid of the Romans and do away with the Herods. And finally, for the first time in living memory, we can be free to live our own lives and do what we want to do. And they believed that whenever this Messiah, new Moses figure would come, he would come on the evening of Passover. Passover, then, was always a night of considerable euphoria, because it was a night when the oppressed dared to dream that maybe this would be the night when their oppression would finally end and their pain would go and freedom would come. And at no dinner table in Jerusalem that night was this euphoria felt more keenly than at the table of Jesus and his friends. These men had known Jesus for 3 years, and they had known him exclusively in a context of misery. As they travelled around Israel, they'd seen firsthand the oppression of the Romans. They'd seen firsthand the corruption and the consequences of excessive Herodian taxes. And increasingly they had come to believe, as they listened to Jesus' subversive teachings, that he was the one. In fact, at certain points in the conversation, the C word, the Christ word, had even been mentioned. This is the one in whom their people had long believed. And now here they were, finally in Jerusalem. And in their minds there is no doubt that tonight is the last night of oppression. And tomorrow is the dawn of a brand new day when Jesus will usher in the long hoped for golden era and everything will get better. No doubt in their minds this is what's happening. Jesus, however, John later would write, isn't thinking about a better tomorrow. Jesus is eating what he knows will be his last meal. He says Jesus knew that the time had come for him to leave the world and go to his Father. In other words, Jesus is there and he knows that tomorrow is going to bring the cops, it's going to bring torture, it's going to bring death and sadness. Then the next sentence is a complete non sequitur for me. First part, Jesus knows that tomorrow is going to be miserable. Second part, having loved his own who were in the world, he then showed them the full extent of his love. Does that make no sense at all? Like if I'm sitting there with these 12 friends of mine and I don't know that tomorrow is going to be the worst day of my life, I would be thinking, can tonight be about me? Like, please, for once in my life, can it be about me? And what I'm going through and what I'm feeling? Jesus, it seems, is searching for a way to make it about them. Sensitive to how they're feeling and what they're going through. And then in the next sentence, we see how unsensible these emotions are. We're told that the evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. And then we're told that Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his own power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So, not only is Jesus fully aware of what's going to happen tomorrow, he's also fully aware of who he is and the sort of stuff he can do. My favourite word in that sentence is the word power. I like that word. Notice what John is saying to the church. In using this word power, he's saying Jesus is aware in this moment that he, as the Son of God, is unencumbered by anything. His choices are limitless. With the powers of divinity at his disposal, he is free in this and any other moment to do anything he likes, any way he likes. He is free in a way that only God can be free. And with that freedom, with the ability to do anything he wants, you'd think the first thing he'd want to do would be to magic himself up a baseball bat and beat the crap out of Judas. Now, come on. There's Judas sitting at Jesus' table eating Jesus' food that Jesus is paying for. He's given Judas a job for the last 3 years, and Judas has probably got his Sunday face on. You know that one? Meanwhile, he's wearing a wire, about to sell everyone out, ruin everyone's plans, spoil everyone's dreams. I think a baseball bat would be a great development in this story. On the cusp of a revolution that changes everyone's life, a traitor gets beaten to death over dinner. I'd watch that movie. I think I have watched that movie. However, Jesus, a man whom we are specifically told can do anything he wants, has unlimited power at his disposal, chooses to kneel down before his followers and his betrayer and wash their feet. Oh, no. Now let me set this up for you by explaining that in the days before paved roads and Argyle socks, washing feet was an integral part of everyone's everyday life. So in this photo you can see a guy with questionable footwear, and this photo was taken at Burning Man, which I confess is probably somewhere on my list of wants in life. Feeling a little bit of judgment there. Anyway, so this guy's at Burning Man, and as you can see, his feet are somewhat horrible. And in Jesus' day, this is what everyone's feet looked like. Everyone had horrible feet, right? Nasty. And so when you went into somebody's home or into somebody's building, it was normal practice that somebody would have to wash your feet. And this business of this job was governed by strict social and societal conventions. Remember, this is the East. This is an Oriental culture where the whole business of face, of saving face, and of not losing face is a hugely important issue. And so for that reason, foot washing worked on the principle of lesser to greater. So if you were lower down the social ladder than me, and in the East you always knew where you were on the social ladder, if you were lower down the social ladder than me, then you would wash my feet. That would be appropriate. If you were my peer, or you were my better, you could not wash my feet. That would be entirely inappropriate and would constitute a loss of face, which in your culture would be absolutely unacceptable. So these men go into this room and they're having dinner and their feet look just like this. And so the question immediately becomes, when they enter the room and they're about to have dinner, who's going to wash feet? And very quickly they conclude, no one is. Jesus is boss, he can't wash anyone's feet, and the rest of us are all peers, so we can't wash each other's feet. So they come to the correct answer, no one can wash anyone's feet, the feet stay dirty, sorry. So in this story you have a group of people who've all come to the right conclusion. We can't serve one another. It would be wrong. Next sentence, Jesus, remember, free to do anything he likes. With all of the powers of divinity at his disposal, gets up from the meal, takes off his outer clothing, and wraps a towel round his waist. Now, you don't get the significance of that because the only time you wrap a towel around your waist is at the beach or at the spa or something like that, or when you come out of the shower. In in ancient cultures, a towel was the uniform of a servant. It was the uniform of a molly maid. And it's a very demeaning phrase. For example, there's a very racist Jewish commentary on the book of Genesis that talks about a wife of Abraham. And there's a very peculiar reference in the Midrash. It says this. It says, Abraham divorced his wife, not by giving her a divorce certificate. He got a shawl and he wrapped it around her waist so that everyone would know that she was a slave. And everyone around the table that night knows exactly that this is the reference, that this is exactly what's going on here. So when Jesus gets up and wraps something round his waist, deliberately puts on the uniform of a molly maid, everyone is uncomfortable. He's losing face on purpose. It makes no sense. After that, he pours water into a basin and begins to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel wrapped around him. In all of the literature that survived from the ancient world, this is the only instance where a boss demeans himself by washing the feet of his subordinates. Servants wash the feet of their masters. Wives wash the feet of their husbands. Students wash the feet of their teachers. On no other occasion in ancient literature does this happen. In the next sentence, Peter grasps the incongruity of the situation. He says, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Doesn't make sense. Jesus replied, you don't realize what I'm doing, but later you will. In other words, Peter, tomorrow you're going to see me die a rather puzzling, barbaric death, and none of this will make any sense to you. But in the coming months and in the coming years, as you reflect upon everything that you're seeing tonight and everything that you're going to see tomorrow, you will understand that although I was free to do anything I wanted, I chose to use my freedom for you. Although I could spend my life any way I wished to, I chose to spend it on you. Because I loved you. And I want you to remember that. It was never about me. It was about you. Now, for the past 25 minutes or so, you've probably been wondering, that's nice, but how does that help me decide what I really want in life? Very simple. I think there's a level at which we all want to sit on a beach drinking rum from coconuts, or some version of that. Really? 3 people? Okay, right. And, or maybe, not, all of us have some fantasy that where it's us living a carefree life. We all have some fantasy where we're on some kind of permanent vacation, and the main headline in that fantasy of ours is that it's all about us. Right? I can do what I want to do. I can go where I want to go. I can enjoy what I want to enjoy. And it's me doing what I want to do. We all have that fantasy. And there's probably a week, barely a week goes by where we don't think about it. But what you want, remember what we said in week 1 of this series, what you want and what you really want are probably not the same thing. And you can't discover what you really want until you first figure out what you really value. Until you figure out what's really important to you in life. And my guess is that what's really important to you is not sitting on a beach drinking rum from a coconut. My guess is that your real values are more nobler than that. My guess is you're probably better than that. So with your permission, I would like to take you through an unsettling exercise. You can't really give me permission because I haven't told you what it is yet, so you'll have to roll with it. So you can try this now, or you can try it again during the week. So here's what I want you to think about. Picture the scene. The chapel's full. They're playing your favourite song on the PA. Your family are all there. Your friends are there. There's even some people you don't like who showed up. It's your funeral. There's an order of service on the pews, and there's a photo of you on the front cover, and it's a good one. They used one from 30 years ago. And on the inside, there is the actual order of service, and there's 3 people speaking. One of your children's going to say a few words. One of your friends is going to say something. And then one of your colleagues from work. Now think deeply about this question. What would you like those people to say about your life? Don't think about what they're going to say. Don't think about what they'll probably say. Think about what you would like them to say. What kind of parent would you like to have been? What kind of character would you like them to have seen in you? How would you like to have made them feel? What would you like your friends to have seen in you? What would you have liked your colleagues to notice about you? I think, it's not my thought, but I agree with it. I think that if you carefully consider what you would like to be said of you at your own funeral, you will discover your own personal definition of success. If you get a clear picture of this, then you will know what's important to you. Then you'll get close to discovering what your values truly are. And I'll bet that in most cases, most people's definition of success has very little to do with the stuff they got or the things they achieved, and a lot to do with how they treated people. I'll bet that you're actually at your happiest when it's not about you at all. Unless you're like a psychopath or something. But I'll bet that your best moments in life are the moments where it wasn't about you, but about someone else. I bet some of your happiest memories are when you were just so busy, but you took time out to help your kids with some project they were working on. I'll bet the high points of your career weren't the times where you got the big bonus, but the times where you did the right thing, even though doing the right thing was the hard thing to do. I'll bet you wouldn't swap your close friendships for 1,000 coconuts on 1,000 beaches. I'll bet that what you really, really want in life is to be good. I'll bet that what you really want is to live well. And so I'll bet that what you really want and what God really wants for you are pretty close. Pretty close. You know some of the things it says in the Bible about the Christian life? the fruit of the Spirit is. Can anyone fill in what it says next? Love, joy, peace. This is one example that came to my mind. One of the things God does in your life, wants in your life, love, joy, peace. Does anyone read that in the Bible and go, oh, no, 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 no. It's not what I want. I don't want that. I got a better idea. We sometimes think there's a conflict between what we want and what God wants. And sometimes there is. But what we really want and what God really wants, much closer than we dare to imagine. Looking forward to Easter next Sunday. Thank you for coming. See you next week.